Or should we start? No? We can start, huh? Okay, are you ready? You see, I have two microphones. Impressive. So my name is Dominique Bénard. I was in a former time director of educational method at the WSEC Bureau. And I am very happy to be again in the SCAT circus. Thank you to be there. I started my professional life, in fact, as a psychologist in the school system in France. And I've been always interested by the links between scatting and formal education. And I think that scatting has something to say to formal education. You know that from the beginning, scatting was linked to what was called the New Education Movement, which started at the end of the 19th century in Europe, in Western Europe and in the USA, based on the work of some researchers as John Dewey, Maria Montessori, and also Edouard Claparède in France, or De Crowley in Belgium. And maybe you know that, in fact, Baden-Powell was linked to that movement. Because when he started his experimental camp in Brancy Island, it was at the request to some British educationalists linked with the New Education Movement. And he was also a disciple of Maria Montessori, the famous Italian pedagogist. At this time, there was a cultural struggle, and I think it still exists, between a culture of teaching and a culture of learning. And if you read the books of Baden-Powell, you can see that he is engaged in this struggle. For example, in Headquarter Gazette in January 1912, he wrote, "The secret of sound education is to get each pupil to learn for himself instead of instructing him by driving knowledge into him in a stereotype system." That is clearly a criticism of classical education. And he was also very critical against the military system of training. There are many, many quotations on that in Baden-Powell writings. Very, very often he said, scatting is not military, it's something different. And here, in the Times, just at the end of the First World War, he wrote, "Military drill fashions the individual onto an approved standard as part of a machine, whereas the aim of scatting is to develop his personal character and initiative. Once one works through impression, the military system, the other, scatting, through expression." I think this quotation is quite important. And we can summarize the struggle between the culture of teaching and the culture of learning with a few sentences. Teaching, of course, is what teachers do, and learning is what learners, students, are doing. The teaching culture is teacher-centered. What is important is what the teacher has to say. The learning culture is learner-centered. What is important for it is what the learner is doing. The culture of teaching wants to deliver instruction. Knowledge is delivered by instructors, while the culture of learning wants to create the condition for learning, a learning environment. And students should discover and construct knowledge knowledge is something built through exploration, through experience. The question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the purpose of education? Is it teaching or learning? I think that the answer is quite clear for us in Scouting. And here there is a quotation of Alvin Toffler, which is very important, I think. The illiterate of the future will not be the person who cannot read. It will be the person who does not know how to learn. How do we learn? The researchers have found that we are learning through cycles, wheels of learning. There is a first wheel here that we are using for simple problems. We start by observing what we have done and what were the results we have achieved. And we reflect about that. And we think at the alternatives we could use to get better results. And we make a decision. We choose one of these alternatives. And we implement it. And we start again. We observe the result and so on. This is the way Homo sapiens sapiens has learned from the origin of the humanity. But when the problems start to be more difficult, we tend to ask the help of others. And we start working as a team. And the second will appear, which is quite important. From the reflecting phase, helped by the other, we start to reconsider our assumption, what we are believing. Because the other are challenging what we think, and that is helpful. And we reconnect our experience with the experience of the other, with previous experience that we had. And that helps us to put in a new frame what we were thinking, to get out of the box. And that helps to find better solution. And we go back to reflecting and deciding what we will implement and so on. You know, the researcher said that it takes a lot of time for Homo sapiens, for example, to access to writing. Because at the beginning of humanity, the people were disseminated a lot the word, and there were just a few. So it was not easy for them to collaborate. Homo sapiens appeared about 130,000 years ago, and writing appeared only 5,000 years ago. A lot of things, a lot of experience during more than 100,000 years. Okay? How to create the condition of learning? I propose to you 3 tools that are dialogue, experience, and cooperation. First, dialogue. Dialogue is coming from 2 Greek words. Dia, which means between, and logos, which means word. So that means the word between us, the words that we can share. And of course, that is the inverse of monologue, which exists too often in the classical classroom, where only the teachers has the right to speak. Of course, it is changing a little now. The first condition of dialogue is to see things from the children's point of view. Célestin Freinet, which is a famous French school reformer, when he was entering into a new classroom, the first thing he was doing was to remove the platform upon which the desk of the teacher was placed at this time, because he wanted to be at the same level as the children. And that is an echo of what Baden-Powell said. The Scoutmaster has to be neither schoolmaster, nor pastor, nor instructor. He has to put himself at the level of the older brother, that is to see things from the boy's point of view. Again, you see how Baden-Powell was on the side of the culture of learning and not of the culture of teaching. The second condition is to recognize the dignity of children. Children are not empty containers to be filled up. You know, a famous Brazilian educator, Paulo Freire, was calling the banking education, this kind of education which consider that children are empty container to be filled up. So they have no feeling, they have no knowledge, they are ignorant, they are empty, and the teacher has to fill them up. No, the children have experience, they have knowledge already, they have expectation, they have desires, and that counts a lot. I have to listen them to discover their wants and their needs if I want to help them learn. The third condition is to communicate and to share with them. The issue is not to simply transmit information from a sender to a receiver. We need to engage relationship and exchange. And we need to believe that young people will learn things from us, but we will learn also things from them. If you are successful in this dialogue approach, the benefit for that is youth-adult partnership. Thanks to this dialogue, young people can recognize what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses in a secure way. And they can start to set up their own learning or educational objectives. They are encouraged to actively engage in achieving their education objective instead of being dependent of the teacher. And that is auto-education. That is the most important thing. They become subject of their own learning and not only object of a teaching. And here there is a rule that every educator should have. Don't ever do what the learner can do. Don't even decide what the learner can decide. A question again. In training courses, in Scouting, do the Scout leaders learn how to enter in dialogue with young people? Is it part of the training? That is quite important. And also a quote of Rabindranath Tagore, don't limit a child to your own learning, for he was born in another time. Experience. Here also a quotation very important from Paulo Freire. Knowledge emerges only through invention and reinvention, through the restless, impassioned, continuing, hopeful inquiry human beings pursue in the world, and with each other. You cannot transmit knowledge. Knowledge is a conquest. Remember also that, I think you know that, but it's quite important. There are activities and there are experience. Sometimes we say in scouting, young people are not coming to scouting to be educated. Yes, of course. They don't want to be taught. But they want to learn. And they are learning through funs, through activities, through experience, through a lot of things. It is funny for them to learn. We have to make a difference between activity and experience. Activity is what the person is doing. It is external. But what is counting for education is not the activity, it is the experience that young people are living through this activity. This is internal. It is what happens inside the person while the person is doing the activity. Baden-Powell said, don't preach the Scout law. Activities should allow an experience through a trial and error process, an experience, a discovery. And it is why Scouts are called Scout. A Scout is an explorer. It is or she is a pathfinder. Somebody who wants to find a way, who wants to find a solution. So trial and error is quite important for that. Doing and thinking. And that is also the meaning of adventure. We are not sure of the result, but we try. Also, ideas and values should be presented to young people as open issues, not as truth that they have to believe, but as issues they can experience and evaluate by themselves. Don't preach the Scout law, but let people have an experience, a group life, evaluate this group life, and find rules to be decided together in the light of the Scout law to live better. Last thing, which is very important today in the field of experience, is that very often today people are marginalized in the society because they are put at school during all the day. They are closed in the building. They don't see what their father is doing. They don't see the real life. In Scouting, we should involve young people in community service activities. That means in assessing the needs of the community, identifying what we could do to improve some problems, and making projects to implement some solutions. When you are doing that, you can achieve a situation where young people are recognized by the community as having a serious role, a responsible role in the society. And at this turn, the community can feel that it is also involved in the education of children and young people. Because today, too often, people say that education is the affair of specialists, not the affair of simple people. Here we are here. A question again. Do we help Scout leaders learn how to design an activity in order to open meaningful experience to young people and achieve educational objectives in our training courses? Or do we just teach them how to run stereotypes and repetitive activities? Okay? Last tool, cooperation. In the traditional school system, cooperation is forbidden. The rule is competition between people, not cooperation. In scouting, we think that cooperation is quite important. But cooperation requires group work and role sharing. It cannot exist in the structure of the classical classroom, where student and teacher are face to face, facing each other without mediation. Which is also an explanation of violence at school. Many people say there is a violence in school that is a scandal. But when you think at that, there is a situation of violence for young people at school. They are closed all the day in a classroom. They have to be silent. They have to be obedient. They have to be passive. That is a situation of violence against them. So how to build cooperation? First, we need to have small groups, because in a small group, we can communicate easily, and that fosters cooperation. That are the patrols or the teams. Acting in small groups is natural for young people. When they are in spontaneous activities, they are making small groups. They are making teams. And that brings to them sense of belonging, sense of mastery of power, because they can do things by themselves, freedom and autonomy, and also stimulation. They are stimulating each other, and they have fun, and they learn. What brings small groups is peer education, and that is quite important also, peer education. The teacher is not the only person who can educate. Young people are educating each other. I was involved in 3 years ago in a project in IT after the earthquake. And the school system was a disaster. And the idea we had was to start peer education in order to encourage young people to learn. So with the teacher, we select one child who was better at school, and we ask him or her to help a small group of other children to do their homework. And we were surprised by the result. It was really impressive. And you know that a researcher that is on YouTube, a researcher made a research in India, in a very poor village. He put a computer in a wall. It was not possible to remove the computer, but just to have access to help me, what is the word? Keyboard. The keyboard, yes, thank you. And the only things he was doing was to encourage people young people to experiment. They asked him, what is it? They were illiterate. What is it? I don't know, try. Several months after, the people were able to read and were speaking English and were able to use a computer. Okay? So young people are able to learn together by helping each other. And there are two roles that young people can have in a patrol, for example. A role of tutor, that means having skills and being able to pass this skill to others, and a role of mentor, that is to support the other, to encourage them, to speak with them. The fact that young people are closer each other in knowledge and status help them to express opinion, ask questions, and risk untested solution. and this is the way we are learning. So it's quite important in scouting to have a difference of age and maturity between young people in the same age range. Not too big, because if the difference is too big, they will have different centers of interest and the cooperation will be difficult. But the difference of age of 4 years, for example, between the youngest and the oldest is good in age range. At school, children are almost at the same age in the classroom. So peer education is more difficult. Okay, you know the patrol system. I will not have to say a lot of things. Just one. In Scout literature, most often, the Scout system is presented as a system of working in small group, full stop. That is a big mistake. The patrol system is a system of youth involvement in decision making and of youth empowerment. It is why there is not only the patrol or the small team, but there are also council, the council of the patrol leaders, and the assembly of the troop to discuss together and to make this decision together. And in the patrol system functions as a little republic of young people, with the government, which is the patrol leader council, with the adult leader as expert. It is the government of this small republic. That means that the good leader should not take any decision except in case of security without, and let the decision be taken by the council of patrol leaders. Secondly, there is the assembly of all the scouts, which is in some case, in some way, the parliament of the unit, where they can make big decisions, select activities, evaluate the group life, and decide together rules at the light of the Scout law. And the Scout law is the fundamental law of this republic. It is the values which is used to evaluate the group life. And that was explained by Baden-Powell. There is a quotation of Baden-Powell. Here he said, the patrol system is not only a way, sorry, it's not Baden-Powell, it's me. The patrol system is there. The patrol system leads each boy to see that he has some individual responsibility for the good of the patrol. It leads each patrol to see that it has definite responsibility for the good of the troop. It makes the troop and all scouting, for that matter, a real cooperative effort. Question: if we do not involve young people in decision making, in fact, we invite them to be passive, and they will learn to be passive, without power, except that of obedience. Is that our view of education? So, to conclude, I would like to share with you some reflection about the synergy between formal and non-formal education. Thanks to Edward, I discovered a very good paper written by an American researcher, John Farrell, who analyzed several emerging models appearing in various parts of the world in formal education. Farrell said, it seems that formal education cannot be reformed everywhere in the world. There were a lot of attempts to reform the classical school system, and all the attempts were failure, except in some countries. And he quotes 3 emerging models. Escuela Nueva in Colombia. I don't know if you are scouts from Colombia there. You know this? The non-formal primary education program of the Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee, the BRAC, which is very famous. Are there people from Bangladesh here? No? And the community school program of UNICEF in Egypt. Are there people from Egypt there? No? So these programs are quite successful. They are targeting severely marginalized children and young people. And the scientific evaluation made showed that they achieve better results than the traditional school program. And Farrell asked himself how to explain this success. And the reply he found, and we should be very proud of this reply, because he said, Maria Montessori and Robert Baden-Powell were right all along. That means that this program were successful because they were using the element of the SCAT method. They were using dialogue, cooperation, and experience. And Farrell concludes, Scouting is a form of pedagogy which echoes strongly in these new alternative programs and reflect clearly some of the main discoveries of recent cognitive science. So, in many countries, Scouting is school-based. But what I've observed many times when I was the director of the educational method at the World Scout Bureau is that the teacher who were engaged in Scouting in this association, too often they were introducing the teaching culture in Scouting instead of introducing the learning culture in school. So that is something we should change. We should be proud of our method, and we should show to the school masters what Scouting could bring to them. Also, we have to identify and support the initiative of change emerging in the formal education system. And I hope that Scout Association from Colombia, Egypt, and Bangladesh are involved in this experience. Some ways that we could use. We could offer resources for the training of teachers. We could offer these three tools: dialogue, experience, and cooperation. We could offer peer tutoring to reduce school failure. We could offer to complement school program with education for life skills. And we should propose to strengthen with a partnership between formal education and non-formal education, to strengthen education by combining fully trained teachers and community resource people, Scout leaders and others. And to finish, I'd like to share with you a quotation of Baden-Powell, quoted by Farrell. Dr. Montessori, wrote Baden-Powell, has proved that by encouraging a child in its natural desires, instead of instructing it in what you think it ought to do, you can educate it on a far more solid and far-reaching basis. It is only tradition and custom that ordains that education should be a labor. One of the original objects of Scouting for boys, the first book of Baden-Powell, was to break through this tradition. Thank you. Yes. I have to take the microphone. Which one? The two.
Thank you for the wonderful and presentation with a lot of clarity about the Scout method. I was wondering, you have a lot of references to how we educate our adults in Scouting. And I know how many countries in here educate their leaders like this, sitting in a classroom with courses. How many of you do that? We do that a lot. It looks like that's one of the main ways of teaching our adults. So coming back to your presentation, how do you think, if that is our primary approach to educating our adults, what do you think about that in terms of your two cultures?
Yes, thank you for this question. It's quite important because the problem I've seen already, that I have experienced it already, is that if you are training leaders in that way, they will repeat that with children. That's clear. So you have to introduce also in the training of leaders, but that will be discussed in other areas, I think, dialogue, cooperation, and experience. It is the same. And in the training of leader proposed by Baden-Powell, there was no difference of pedagogy between for adults and for young people. It was the same. Okay? IT.
Thank you, Dominique. Brunel Etienne from Haiti. And I totally agree with you 100% that we should leave the choice to the young people. And we could even leave them the values, and I'm pretty sure that they will figure it out and come up with some values that are better adapted to today's world. But if we do, values are probably one of the least common denominator. If we do leave that to them, is there a risk that we as a movement lose some of our identity?
Okay, what you are describing is the attitude of laissez-faire. Okay? That is quite different what I tried to explain to you. Laissez-faire is just... Have you seen the famous film, The Laws of the Fly? It tells a story where children are abandoned in an island and without any adult, and it is a disaster. They are torturing, killing each other, and so on. Yeah?
Yes. Like my colleagues, I thought your presentation was really inspirational and very much bringing us back to what's important about Scouting and our method. And we've spoken about the difficulty of getting our own adults to understand how they should deal with young people, and that the journey of learning is a journey of mutual respect. And just in working with teachers, sometimes you see a different philosophy on the other side. That there are basically two philosophies for working with young people. One is based on policing and control, and one is based on building trust and responsibility. And Scouting must always be on the side of trust and responsibility. And that's certainly what I took from your presentation today, that we need to be very careful that we maintain the advantage we have handed to us by Baden-Powell and affirmed by Marie Montessori.
For example, what is the difference between laissez-faire and what we want to do? We need to be directive on the frame, and we need to be non-directive on the content. What does it mean? For example, there is no discussion about implementing the patrol system. For that, you have to be directive. There should be patrol, there should be council of patrol leaders, there should be the scout law, there should be the assembly of all the scouts. That is compulsory, not discutable. But the activities can be chosen by young people, selected by them. About the scout law, I have not said that you shall not explain the scout law. You have to explain the scout law. You have to explain what are the values of the scout law. But then you have to explain, you don't have to explain that through a lesson, but through the life of the group. After an activity, the leader invite the children to evaluate what we have done together. And the problems will emerge. Lack of sharing, disputes, and so on. And the leader can say, do you think we can live like that if we are scouts? And you will see that the children will get the good reply. And they will decide rules at the light of the scout law to change, to improve the quality of the group life. And that is the way the scout leader is intervening. He should not stay silent. He has to say, I disagree with what you are doing. That's clear. Okay, other question?
Scary. Hello, I'm Laura Ritola. I'm doing my PhD research on scouting and citizenship in Finnish scouting program. And the two learning wheels that you introduced, both of them, or they were connected with the word reflection. And also Freire, who you referred to, sees reflection as a tool for learning and empowerment of people. But how do you see the role of reflection within the scouting? And especially, do you see that within the training of adults, we give enough room for teaching or learning how to mentor reflection?
It's difficult for me to make a general judgment because there are many different scout associations, of course. But what I would like to say is that the best way of training leaders when they have some experience is a problem-posing approach. They have problems in their unit. For example, they don't know very well how to choose activities. As a leader, is it my role to propose an activity to young people, or do I let them select an activity? How to do? They don't know. They have a problem there. So you can invite the leaders to form a group and to reflect together on that, to share their experience, to find new solutions, to test them, to experiment, to use the trial and error approach. And that is reflection, I think. Okay? See?
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Andreas. I'm the National Training Commissioner from Azerbaijan, and I would like to make two comments. Okay, first on the core of your presentation. How can we bridge between formal and non-formal educational models? If we go back to the Scout method, we will see that we have a module of personal development. So that module, if we can give experience through activities that are also given through the school system, we can bridge this condition. And I think this is very important for the new generation. So the other comment I would like to do is that the essence of scouting is not to learn, but how to find ways to improve your behavior and change mentalities that exist. So the most difficult part of scouting is not to learn the theory. The theory is very easy. The difficulty is to make a scout leader to see deeply in the heart of a child and understand what are the potentials to change and how he can improve as a person. So I think that we need to focus on that when we are discussing for Scout training leaders. Thank you.
Somebody want to add something more on that? Because I should not be the only one to react. Yes.
Thank you, Dominique. May I also commend you on your presentation. One of the things that I believe that we have noticed in our NSO and in the Asia Pacific region, as we have become more involved with giving young people greater involvement in their decision making, is that they are setting much higher expectations than what we as Scout leaders, working with patrol leaders, etc., would have expected. And I think that that is a true sign of what Baden-Powell and Montessori would have been talking about, when it is the young people themselves in their communities that are setting expectations and targets much higher than what we have. And I think that that's a true sign of the importance of empowering young people in decision making. Thank you.
Some years ago, I heard a national program commissioner told me, what you are proposing is too complicated. Most of our leaders are unable to do that. So we prefer to give them a basic method and they implement it. My reply to do, and I agree with our friend from Azerbaijan, is that if you want to passionate leaders, adult leaders, you have also to propose them an adventure. And the real educational adventure is to think on this kind of question. But you have to organize that. It is why I think that a problem-posing approach could be a good way. And today, we have seen that here, with the new communication method, you could make groups in your association working all over the territory and working with Facebook on some issues that they want to, for which they want to find a solution together. And we can give them advices, you can give them some methods, you can give them some support, some resources, and encourage them to work together. I think that is a new method of training that will appear in the future, and appear already. It is what we are doing today.
Thank you. My name is Lars Koland. I would like to highlight two observations. One is how valuable adults who have learned to apply the Scout method in an educational setting, how valuable we are, or they are, to companies, to universities, to the school system, to politics, to everything. And I think we are underestimating how valuable we are and how valuable it is that what we facilitate young people to learn. And I think the people who can do what we can do clearly are the leaders that will be needed tomorrow. Observation 2. I would like to highlight one point that Dominique made, is that this organization should be much stricter on method than we are, because we are devaluating some of the most important aspects of Scouting, which are our method. We are devaluating that by doing all sorts of unfocused things. We should be very precise on method and much more open on activity. And in reality, we seem to be the opposite. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Mehdi Benkelil. I'm from Tunisia. Dominique, thank you for the great presentation. I had only 2 comments on it. The first comment is a slide where you said, are we training the leaders to plan activities, etc., or are we giving them stereotyped and repeated activities? And I think it's a very important slide because in many NSOs, at least in my NSO, the training scheme and the training team are maybe the most strong team. It's even sometimes like a sect or whatever. We have to admit this. And at some point, the focus of scouting changed. So the focus is no more the scout, but the unit leader. And I think it's a very bad thing. And I think that it's very important that we recenter the scope of scouting, which is the young, beginning from beavers to rovers. And it's very important that in our renewing the training schemes and the wood badge training, etc., we work more on mentoring, coaching, etc., and letting the young people being really involved. Second comment was related to the school-based scouting. It is now in some NSOs, at least in the Arab region, it's very involved, it's very present, and it's an easy way to raise membership. And we have new trends in my NSO, for example, which encourage to have this kind of school-based scouting. And it's very, very important to state that we must be aware not to have the influence of the formal education on scouting, but the contrast. And I think maybe looking forward, and maybe if I can raise a recommendation to our rapporteurs, maybe like a guideline or a toolbox or something like that from WSEC can help NSOs who want to enter in this school-based system or in school-based unit, scout units, in order to remind them that because the argument we receive is that the teachers are the expert in pedagogy. We are not expert. So we are, there is a tendency to learn from them. And a guideline, maybe the Farrell study can be a good reference, can make importance on what we do. And we are also experts, even if we did not went to an education university or whatever. So maybe a recommendation for our rapporteurs working on a kind of toolbox or guideline or whatever for the NSOs who want to have school-based scouting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Bertolt. I'm from Indonesia. As you know, Indonesia has 20 million scouts. We mostly in school-based. So regarding to the school-based, my experience in Indonesia that why the government asks scouts to be one part of the school-based system, because the school cannot give character building to the young people. So the government and the society asks scouts to help them to give character building to young people. That is the experience in Indonesia. For this year 2013 new implementation national curriculum, the Scout is now as one of the mandatory co-curricular for the for the elementary school in Indonesia. So the problem in Indonesia is now how to have a more scout leader to help in the school, because sometimes the teacher say, no, I cannot. I'm too busy with my duty, so I cannot be a scout leader. So the problem is now is to find more volunteers to become a scout leader. Thank you.
Thank you. But he is responding to your desire. The Scout of Indonesia, 10 million members, they have a huge experience. Sorry? 20 million. Okay. So you have a huge experience in the field of cooperation between formal education and non-formal education. And you have a lot of bring to other associations. So I support your idea. I think WSEC should start work on school-based association. And that could bring also some ideas to other associations. For example, in my country, in France, the government is changing the school time, and they become a little more intelligent now. And they decided to have non-formal activities at school. And I think that scouting should take place in these activities. So other associations that the school-based association could benefit from this research. Other remarks?
Dominic, I've got a question. My NSO doesn't have 20 million members. We've got a lot fewer. So you've mentioned formal education is changing, and I know that challenge-based learning is happening a lot in schools. And in my country, children in schools can earn badges, and they go outside and learn in the woodlands. And I guess a big part of our identity in Scouts is that we are not school. But listening to you and seeing what's changing in education, I can't help but feel school is becoming Scouts. So the question I've got to ask is, if the schools are coming into our space, if they are taking our method and using our method, where does that leave us? What should we do? What do you think we should do?
I think the danger will not arrive tomorrow, huh? Because there is a lot of things to change before to achieve this result. But what I think there are two structures. There is non-formal education and formal education. They are separated. They have their own way of working. That's okay. But they need to cooperate together. We need to create a kind of synergy. When I was a child in France, that existed in fact, because in many cases, the school teacher, at the end of the school, he was also Scout leader. Or he was working in a non-formal education organization. But now that is finished, because they think that this is not their work. We have to recreate that, because school cannot do character building, as you said. That's some more comments?
Thank you, Dominic. I'm from Malaysia. I'd just like to share with you. In Malaysia, the schools do have these activities, and not only Scouts, we have the St. John's, and then the Red Crescents, and the Girl Guides, and so on. But in my observations, most of the leaders from these uniform bodies, they are all family Scouts, most of them. So in other words, we are, I would say, being complemented by having training these people to be leaders of various other groups. So in a way that I feel that the leadership being trained by Scouting is doing fairly well, but only thing is probably, as you said, a little bit more adjustment, a little bit more coloring will make it more wonderful. Thank you.
Finished? Online question, okay.
Okay, this one, sorry.
Online question.
Okay, and a question from the internet, from Twitter. People ask, what about the female scout?
What about female scout?
What's about Manilus?
Manila.
Manilus.
What about the female scout? Who wants to reply? There are many females there. Ladies, you want to reply? Okay. They don't see what is the problem. There are many, there are male and female in the room, and we don't see what is the problem. Okay, other question? Other remarks?
I come from Hong Kong. I want to make a comment here. It's dangerous to say that schools do not have character building. Be careful. I want to, I like the word synergy. The synergy between the formal education and non-formal education. Now, we need to see the cooperation from the school because most teachers have their different working system. And also, they have a very heavy workload. They have pay attention to the academic and also the public examination. If you understand their situation, then you can find a cooperation between the teachers and also our Scout leaders. So I want to mention that. Otherwise, all the school will say that, oh, you are bad, you are the most important of NGO. So I let all the character building for the NGO or for the Scout. Right? I don't know, you understand my... Yeah.
I think there are many issues to be studied, to be examined about this cooperation, this synergy between formal education and non-formal education. It is why a kind of research group will be welcome, because we have to find solution to these issues. Okay?
Clement Chibang from Congo. Je vais parler en français, comme ça vous allez traduire en anglais. Voilà. Je suis d'accord avec celui qui a dit qu'on ne peut pas confirmer que l'école ne forme pas le caractère. Donc on ne peut pas attribuer ça forcément comme un apanage au scoutisme. Mais voilà. Congo. Congo, République démocratique du Congo. Okay. La plupart des chefs d'unité pensent bien faire quand ils sont directifs, quand ils essaient d'imiter l'école. Quand ils donnent bien son instruction, ils pensent qu'ils travaillent bien. C'est plus difficile quand il attend que l'idée sorte des enfants et qu'ils puissent accepter leurs décisions. Voilà, c'était ça ma contribution.
I think that we will study this issue in the workshop that we will run, Edward and me. Remind the title of the workshop? We forgot also.
This is called Rethinking Education, Challenges for Scouting, Lessons for Schooling. And it's tomorrow from 3 to 6:30.
It was a little commercial, because you should come to this workshop. It will be very interesting also. We will study this issue. The school system, as it exists now, was built at the time of the Industrial Revolution in Europe. And after that, through colonialism, it was exported in other countries. And for example, I was working in Afghanistan recently, and the people are doing lessons when they have to train somebody. And they told me, this is the natural way. This is part of our culture. But in fact, it's not true. In their culture, I discussed with other people, they had, like in most of the country in the past, they have a culture of mentoring to help people to learn. Not a culture of teaching. That is quite different. Mentoring is giving advice, is the Socrates method, you know. And we should not forget that. The current system of education was born in Europe with the Industrial Revolution. And I think is no longer adapted to the needs of today's world. It will change. It will change with time. For example, it was, just a little remark, it was made on the idea that the world is like a clock made of little part, discrete part. If you assemble all these parts together, and if you know each of the parts, you can know everything and control everything. But science today tells us that is wrong. In fact, the part of the system is not important. What is important are the relationship, the relation between the parts. And we have to help children to learn about system, to have a systemic approach. That is not done in most of the school. Okay? That was a short example, but we could discuss that as well. Okay, I'm a little lost. We have time? Still time? Finished? Okay. Well, thank you very much.